pros del fonpas granas. Hymnon exar honcalan sumi.
Welcome back to the podcast history of our world. Chapter 38, Democratic Tyranny. The year is 514 BC, and the two sons of Pisistratus named Hippias and Hipparchus had been co-tyrants of Athens for a little over 10 years now. Hippias, the older of the two, concerned himself with matters of the state and was an adept ruler, while Hipparchus, being younger, preferred to use his position differently. He loved the arts and brought in many notable poets and musicians to Athens, but he also had a tendency for being hot-tempered, especially when it came to love. Now it so happens that Hipparchus had fallen in love with a young man named Harmodius, but when his advances were denied, the co-tyrant decided to retaliate in a particularly nasty way. The Panathenaea was coming up, and all of Athens would come out to celebrate this event. Think of it as a big festival with games and poetry competitions and good food, all dedicated to everyone's favorite goddess, Athena. Of course, no religious event would be complete without a sacrifice, and to carry the knives to do this were the basket carriers, a group of virgin girls selected for their chastity and devotion. Hipparchus informs the younger sister of Harmodius that she is to carry a basket in the parade. What an honor! So kind of him, especially in light of that whole nasty business between him and the older brother. What a guy. Yes, well, scorned lovers and all that. The day of the games, Hipparchus addresses the crowd and the basket carriers, and publicly declares that Harmodius' younger sister can't carry a basket after all, for only virgins have this honor. Ooh, low blow. The girl is horrified and runs off crying. Harmodius and his lover, Aristogiton, were appalled at this insult and agreed to do the only reasonable thing, assassinate Hipparchus. They gathered supporters and waited till a day when Hipparchus would participate in a parade. As the crowd lined the street to watch the procession of government officials, religious figures, athletes, and others march in the parade, the assassins waited, concealing their daggers within their robes. Yet while they waited for the opportune moment to strike, they saw a fellow conspirator chatting up Hippias, the other co-tyrant, and fearing that the plan was being revealed, rushed the procession, slaying Hipparchus. Harmodius is killed on the spot by the guards, and his lover Aristogiton is taken to the prisons to be tortured. Hippias no doubt mourned his brother's death, but his co-tyrant couldn't help but wonder, where are the assassins coming for him? He rushed down to the prison and demanded Aristogiton tell him of their plans. The prisoner remarked that if he were spared he would reveal everything. Hippias extended his hand as a promise to do so, but Aristogiton spits on the ground, admonishing him for giving out his hand to the murderer of his brother. Well, this enraged Hippias so much that he took out his own dagger and stabbed the assassin to death. Now the tyrant had a problem. The only person who knew of the conspiracy was dead. Who else might be out there? Plotting, waiting, biding their time. They could be everywhere, even in the government. And so Hippias, terrified that his assassination could come at any time, sank into paranoia and cruelty, exiling those he feared would turn against him, imprisoning others, and executing the worst. He needed to be stopped, but no one in Athens had the strength to do so. What the city actually needed, then, was another conspiracy. When Pisistratus took over for the third time, he had banished numerous aristocratic families that had given him such agita the last 2 times he was there. At last, now was their chance to stage a comeback. Knowing that they were no match for Hippias' guard, the exiled families do something really crafty. They donate a brand new temple at Delphi, and then donate some more money to the oracle so that she better interprets the god's messages. This donation worked. Every time a Spartan citizen went to see the oracle, regardless of the question they asked, they were given the same answer. Liberate Athens. But I just wanted to know if I should have the wedding on Friday or Saturday. Liberate Athens. Well, the Spartans eventually agreed. After all, they did love deposing tyrants. And under one of their kings, Cleomenes, they marched off to Athens, defeated the army Hippias had assembled, and blockaded him on the Acropolis. After capturing his children, the tyrant finally surrendered to the Spartans and was exiled from Athens in 510 BC. Oh, and after that, the Spartans just went home. Mission accomplished. Now, the tyranny hadn't been in place long enough that Athens was now scrambling to re-establish government, and the laws of Solon had remained unchanged. But old rivalries quickly flared up again, and without that strong central authority, people quickly fell back into class struggles. On one hand was the Archon Isagoras coming to power in 508. He was a hit with the elite for his laws revoking the rules of citizenship put into place under Solon. Opposing him was Cleisthenes, also an aristocrat, but sympathetic to the needs of the masses. He made promises to include common folk in his new vision of Athenian government, and you can imagine this made him pretty popular. Of course, this also made him dangerous to the power-holding elite, and a nervous Isagoras called back the Spartans to aid him in removing Cleisthenes. King Cleomenes of Sparta dug up something about Cleisthenes. We're not totally sure what, but most suspect it has something to do with some family curse. I'm not making this up. Apparently it was bad enough that Cleisthenes left town to cope with the fallout. And that might have been enough to stop this people's rebellion once and for all. But then the Spartan got greedy. Cleomenes banished roughly 700 families who supported Cleisthenes, a substantial number, and then attempted to dissolve the council, the body of which citizens could sit on. This pushed the Athenians too far, and the city poured out to fight back against this injustice. They blockaded the Spartan king and Isagoras the Archon on the Acropolis for 2 days before finally allowing the Spartans to leave. Isagoras escaped somehow. Maybe they dressed him up as a Spartan? But 300 of his supporters were captured, tried in court, and executed. Cleisthenes and the 700 families were welcomed back to Athens with open arms. The time of the oligarchy had passed. Now it's the people's turn. Note that I've been deliberately avoiding the term democracy so far, because while some argue Cleisthenes is the father of democracy, he called his system isonomia, political equality. Just something to know. Athens had expelled the enemies of her people, but there was one more obstacle to overcome: a humiliated Sparta. Cleomenes was not yet done with this impudent city, and sought to restore Isagoras, this time as tyrant. Hey, I know I said Sparta hates tyranny, but it's a different story when it's your own tyrant. Anyway, Cleomenes is joined by his co-king Demaratos. Remember, the Spartans have 2 kings, and they summon the Peloponnesian League to make war on Athens. They claim the fight is just because they had been tricked from the start by the oracle, and now Athens was ruled by a mob and only they can free it. From the north, the city of Halkis sent soldiers, their ships raiding the coastlines. To the northwest, the men of Boeotia captured small cities friendly to Athens, all under the orders of their Spartan commanders. But when they finally got a glimpse of what they were actually up against, the tides quickly changed. This was no ragtag group of peasants, but the powerful army of Athenian hoplites, decked out in full armor, fueled by patriotic fervor. The Corinthians, members of the League but also allies of Athens, bowed out. They couldn't fight against their friends. Even King Demaratos questioned the validity of this engagement and took his forces home. But the Athenians would not stand down. They go on the offensive against Halkis and Boeotia, taking their soldiers hostage and annexing some of their lands. They're even able to protect the small city of Plataea from Thebes, a major city in Boeotia, and acquire a loyal ally in them. Reflecting on this stunning turnaround, Herodotus writes, "It shows how splendid a thing is political equality. The Athenians under the tyrants were no better soldiers than their neighbors, but once they were rid of them, they were far the best of all. Once they were free, every man was zealous in his own interest." Cleisthenes becomes Archon in 508 BC and set about drastically reforming the government, aiming to prevent any future tyrannies and prevent the elite from gaining too much again. For starters, he radically changed the way Athenians identified themselves. For hundreds of years, Athens had been based on 4 ancient tribes. If you couldn't trace your lineage to one, you might as well accept that you'll never get very far in life. Realizing this system will consistently produce ugly rivalries, he abolishes it, instead establishing 10 tribes not based on history, but where you live, and further breaking that down by region, village, and so on. Next, the council is reborn as the Boule of 500, each tribe sending 50 members chosen by lot annually, completely random, regardless of personal wealth or power. Archons still retain their positions and responsibilities, but each tribe is also appointing 3 additional military leaders representing infantry, cavalry, and a general, the strategos. By spreading out the military leadership, this ensured more discussion in war and prevented one man from gaining too much power. Also on the list of reforms is the curious and strangely awesome practice of exiling a citizen for 10 years called ostracism. Named after the Ostrakhan, a pottery shard with the guilty party's name on it, anyone who was seen as a threat to the democratic process could be voted to basically go away for 10 years. Citizens wrote the name of the intended on these pottery shards, and if the person received at least 6,000 votes, and it's so long, their property would remain safe during this time, and once the 10 years are up, you're more than welcome to come back. It's kind of peculiar, but it's also kind of great. You could see how this could be abused, but also how it could be really satisfying. Just saying. The reforms of Cleisthenes are the first steps towards a true Athenian democracy, but as to the rest of his life, the history disappears, unfortunately. Still, his laws are upheld, and things look promising going into the year 499 BC. Down in Sparta, a tyrant from the Ionian city of Miletus, one Aristagoras, has come to the court of King Cleomenes with an urgent request. The barbarian armies of the Persian Empire are coming to plunder the wealthy Greek cities of Ionia, and only Sparta can save them. They're wealthy, you know. Did I mention that? Oh, good. Plus, the Persians are pushovers. They wear pants for Zeus's sake. Totally easy peasy. What do you say? Keep in mind, Aristagoras is the same turncoat we met in episode 26, who after failing to take the island of Naxos for the Persians, and not having the money to pay them back, instigated a revolt in the Ionian cities. Desperate for allies to save his bacon, he goes to the most logical choice, Sparta. But Cleomenes refuses his request, saying, "My dear Milesian guest, leave Sparta before sundown, because it doesn't matter how smoothly you make your case to the Spartans, if what you want is to lead them away from the sea for 3 months. It's not that the Spartans are going to get homesick, it's that 3 months overseas is 3 months too long to be away from a homeland always on the verge of a massive slave rebellion. Plus, did he really think that gold would tantalize the Spartans? Did he not eat in one of their mess halls? Well, the Spartans were out, but all hope wasn't lost. Aristagoras next turns to the newly ascendant Athenians, who have no such compunctions about leaving the city, and especially after learning that their hated ex-tyrant Hippias had gone over to the Persians. Oh, now it's personal. Athens sends over 20 ships carrying her brave soldiers, and with thoughts of their new freedoms inspiring their actions, these soldiers accompanied the Ionian fighters towards Sardis, the seat of the western satrapy, where, accidentally or not, the city was put to the torch. Oops. Oh, the Athenians shook hands with their allies and beat a hasty tactical advance in the direction of home, wishing the Ionians the best of luck with whatever happens next. But we already know the answer to that. The Ionians were punished severely for the revolt, and the Athenians prepared for an anticipated retaliation. In the late summer of 490 BC, the armies of Persia had arrived on the beaches of Marathon. No one came to Athens' defense, save one. The tiny city of Plataea had not forgotten the Athenians' kindness and sent a force to aid their ally. If you want to hear the details of the battle, re-listen to episode 26. But to quickly summarize, after a stunning charge, the Greeks penned in the lightly armored Persians, denying their cavalry the room to maneuver. After a bloody struggle, the Persians hightailed it back to their boats, after inflicting shockingly few casualties. When the news reached Darius the Great, Shah, he made preparations for a massive retaliatory force, but Egypt rebelled against his rule, and while overseeing its suppression, died there in 486 BC. Succeeding him was his son Kashaya Arsha, Xerxes, and after suppressing the rebellion in Egypt as well as in Babylon, made preparations for the full-scale invasion of Greece in 483 BC. And that's where we'll leave off, because in the next episode it's time for the greatest struggle of the ancient world, the Second Persian Invasion of Greece, or commonly called the Greco-Persian War. It's got action, drama, betrayal, men with impeccable abs, and giant monsters with demon soldier handlers. Okay, maybe not those last two, but it sure is exciting. Are we looking at the fate of Western civilization here? Would the world be different today if the Greeks lost? Why is this still a sensitive topic nearly 2,000 years later? You'll just have to tune in and listen. Next time on the podcast history of our world. To learn more about the ancient Greek music performed by Gregorio Paniagua and his musicians, visit harmoniamundi.com. Support their hard work by purchasing the album from iTunes, Amazon, or from wherever you get your music.